Welcome to Bible Believers Fellowship, where we love you enough to tell you the truth. On these programs, you will be able to follow our expository study of the Authorized King James Version as we read verse by verse through books and occasionally tackle important topics for the purpose of helping Bible believers gain a thorough and accurate understanding of God's Word. We now invite you to join us in our study. But we ended last week by looking at the mercy seat, and we're seeing piece by piece, as you look at the different pieces of furniture in the tabernacle, that we see Jesus. The tabernacle is a beautiful picture of the place that Jesus fills in our relationship with God. And we talked about how the mercy seat is the place where we stand as believers. And the mercy seat sat upon the ark of the testimony. So inside the ark of the testimony was what? The testimony, the tablets with the law. So you make a choice whether you're going to be judged by the law or if you're going to receive the mercy at the mercy seat. So now we're going into verse 23. I'm going to have Mike read verses 23 through 25, and we're going to see the making of the table. It's the table of showbread. Go ahead and read those three verses.
Thou shalt also make a table of shittim wood. 2 cubits shall be the length thereof, and a cubit of the breadth thereof, and a cubit and a half the height thereof. And thou shalt overlay it with pure gold, and make thereto as a crown of gold round about. And thou shalt make unto it a border as of handbreadth round about. And thou shalt make a golden rod to the border
golden crown
thereof round about. A golden crown.
Yeah, that's right. If you notice in verse 23, we can talk about some things that may seem a little academic, but they're not. The measurements for the table of showbread are the same as the measurements of the ark. And that's putting everything on an equal plane, so to speak. Everything would look the same as you go in. And it says in verse 24 to overlay it with pure gold. And also then in verse 25, you make a golden crown to the border. That speaks of the deity of Jesus Christ. And gold represents deity. And Jesus is pictured in these things because, you noticed, it was overlaid. And when Jesus came, 1 Timothy 3:16, we always mention this, that they've destroyed in the new versions. But in the King James Version, it still says, God was manifest in the flesh. And what you have in the pictures of these pieces of furniture for the tabernacle is a picture of the humanity of God, or the humanity of Jesus, overlaid with gold. That pictures his deity. Jesus was the God-man. And so that's what these picture. You have the very human, earth, fleshly table, but it's overlaid with gold. Just like Jesus. When he came, he wasn't half God and half man. I don't want to give the wrong impression there. He was totally man and totally God. It's a mystery. Great is the mystery of godliness. God was manifest in the flesh. But that's what this pictures. And it's a picture of royalty. He's the King of Kings when he returns, but he was the King of the Jews when he came the first time. And you see in verse 25, there's a golden crown. And that pictures the crown on Jesus. I want to pick up on verse 26 and read through 30.
And thou shalt make for it 4 rings of gold, and put the rings in 4 corners that are on the 4 feet thereof. Over against the border shall the rings be for places of the staves to bear the table. And thou shalt make the staves of shittim wood, and overlay them with gold, that the table may be borne with them. And thou shalt make the dishes thereof, and the spoons thereof, and covers thereof, and bowls thereof. To cover withal of pure gold shalt thou make them. And thou shalt set upon the table showbread before me always.
Now in verse 26 where it says the 4 feet thereof, your define probably tells you this, but if you're not aware, we call them legs. So when you see the reference to the table having feet, We call that those legs. And again, in verse 28, it points out that these are overlaid with gold. And on the table was the showbread. And on the showbread, if you look on the back, it has the bread stacked, 6 on one side and 6 on the other. And you'll see that drawn differently or portrayed differently. Some show these kind of like look like rolls, and there'll be 6 on one side and 6 on the other. But that's the way it would have appeared if you were to walk into the temple or the tabernacle and see the table of showbread. But look at that picture, especially the one on the bottom that you have with the table of showbread, and everything's gold. And then you have the candlestick we're getting ready to talk about up above that. But this bread that was on the table speaks of Jesus Christ, who is the bread of life. And you remember Jesus said that. Let's turn over and look at that in John chapter 6. John chapter 6, beginning of verse... let's look at what led into this conversation. Verse 30 says, "They said therefore unto him, What sign showest thou then, that we may see and believe thee? What dost thou work?" So they're asking for signs. And in verse 31, they said, "Our fathers did eat manna in the desert, as it is written, He gave them bread from heaven to eat." Well, in verse 32, "Then Jesus said unto them, Verily, verily, I say unto you, Moses gave you not that bread from heaven, but my Father giveth you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is he which cometh down from heaven and giveth life unto the world. Then said they unto him, Lord, evermore give us this bread. And Jesus said unto them, I am the bread of life. He that cometh to me shall never hunger, and he that believeth on me shall never thirst." So Jesus is the bread of life. Now here's what's interesting. You also see in John 1:1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Well, then look over at 1 John, the epistle, 1 John. And John's first epistle starts out in verse 1 of chapter 1, and he kind of ties this all together. And he says, "That which was from the beginning, which we have heard, which we have seen with our eyes, which we have looked upon, and our hands have handled of the word of life." So you have the bread of life is the word of life. And the word that we have in our hands, the written word, is the bread of life, just as Jesus, the living word, is the bread of life. So we live in a time where we can't walk up and see Jesus on the side of a hill teaching. Jesus spoke about us. He said, "You've seen and believed. Blessed are those who have not seen yet believe." He's talking about us. And our bread is this book we have right in front of us. It's the words of this book that is the bread of life that we feed on. Now back in Exodus 25, we take step by step through the tabernacle, and we continue to see Jesus every time we look at anything in the tabernacle. Now we're going to look at what's called the golden candlestick. And beginning in verse 31, let's read through 33, Mike.
"And thou shalt make a candlestick of pure gold, of beaten work shall the candlestick be made. His shaft and his branches, his bowls, his knobs, and his flowers shall be of the same. And 6 branches shall come out of the sides of it, 3 branches of the candlestick out of one side, and 3 branches of the candlestick out of the other side. 3 bowls made like unto almonds with a knob, and a flower in one branch, and 3 bowls made like almonds in the other branch, with a knob and a flower. So in the 6 branches that come out of the candlestick."
So you see the candlestick on the back of your bulletin there.